Quem acreditou no amor, no sorriso, na flor, então sonhou, sonhou e perdeu a paz. O amor, o sorriso e a flor se transformam depressa demais Quem no coração abrigou a tristeza de ver tudo isso se perder, e na solidão procurou um caminho e seguiu, já descrente de um dia feliz. Quem chorou, chorou, e tanto que o seu pranto já secou. Quem depois voltou ao amor, ao sorriso e à flor, então tudo encontrou, pois a própria dor revelou o caminho do amor e a tristeza acabou.
Down the way where the nights are gay and the sun shines daily on the mountain top, I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Sounds of laughter everywhere and the dancing girls swaying to and fro. I must declare my heart is there, though I've been from Maine to Mexico. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Down at the market you can hear ladies cry out while on their heads they bear. Ackee rice, salt fish are nice, and the rum is fine any time of year. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Down the way where the nights are gay and the sun shines daily on the mountain top, I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Sad to say I'm on my way, won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around, I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.
fazendo 1 ano e meio, amor, que o nosso lar desmoronou. Meu sabiá, meu violão e uma cruel desilusão foi tudo que ficou. Ficou pra machucar meu coração. Tá fazendo 1 ano e meio, amor, que o nosso lar desmoronou. Meu sabiá, meu violão e uma cruel desilusão foi tudo que ficou. Ficou pra machucar meu coração. Quem sabe não foi bem melhor assim. Melhor pra você e melhor pra mim. A vida é uma escola que a gente precisa aprender. A ciência de viver pra não sofrer.
me back. Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch.
Oh, we went out to a party. It was me and Ben and Mac. And before I know what happened, I got an itching on me back. Won't someone scratch, scratch me back? Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. Well, I was quite embarrassed till my two friends I did see. Well, they were madly itching and they were screaming louder than me. Oh, won't you scratch, scratch me back? Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. Once again now, scratch, scratch me back. Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. Now this scratching was contagious, and it didn't take very long. Everybody there was itching as we joined me in this song. And won't you scratch, scratch me back? Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. Hot-a-lugada. Ah, caress me. Once again now. Well, the host, he got excited, picked up the phone in haste, quickly dialed a number and said, man, come spray this place. Everybody,
scratch, scratch me back. Scratch, scratch me back.
It really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. A little softer, scratch, scratch. By the backbone, by the shoulder, it really is a fact. The less I itch, the more I scratch. Everybody now, scratch,
scratch me back. Scratch, scratch me back. It really is a fact.
Vai minha tristeza e diz a ela que sem ela não pode ser. Diz-lhe numa prece que ela regresse, porque eu não posso mais sofrer. Chega de saudade.
came to dominate our lives. Nancy and the kids would always battle to play their favorites. Fred always wanted one song, and that was The Girl from Ipanema. And he would look directly at Pat Bass in the front row, his bride of 67 years. And he would sing the whole song, starting with tall and tan and young and lovely. I'm going to spare you the rest. But it was pure love from Fred for Pat and his never dull grandchildren who are, they're giving the high five in the front row. We're going to tell plenty more stories about Fred tonight, but we're going to go to our speakers after a little bit of news that the family is pleased to be able to announce tonight. Yesterday, the family was told by the mayor's office that soon the city, and we especially want to thank Mayor de Blasio, Councilwoman Rivera, we're going to hear from the Department of Cultural Affairs. There's another recognition from the city, but the city will soon announce the street outside the store is going to be named Fred Bass Place. So stay tuned for another formal dedication, and that'll be a great occasion. Our first speaker is going to be Ben McFall. He's a Strand bookseller of 40 years, described by the New York Times as the Oracle of the Strand. Ben, can you come on up here?
Can you hear me? Can I be heard? Good evening. My name is Ben McFall, and I have approaching the 6th month of my 40th year here at the Strand and Fred Bass. I was in Fred Bass Company longer than I knew my own father. I am from Detroit and went to school in Michigan. And in 1972, various circumstances found me with great friends from college living in suburban Fairfield County, Connecticut. In 1978, having worked at the remarkable bookshop in Westport for a few years, I decided it was actually time to move to New York. In April, a coworker suggested, asked me if I knew the Strand bookstore, and I said no. And she said, I can just see you working there. You should go there and apply for a job. Speak to the owner, a Fred Bass. In late August, I found myself on 12th Street and Broadway, where I first saw Strand. I went in and found Mr. Fred Bass, and I had been working and told him I had been working in a bookstore in Westport, and a coworker had given me his name and suggested that I apply for a job. He said, fill out this application, take this test, and bring it back to me. After returning the document to him, I looked it over, and he looked it over and said, I hire you. You can start tomorrow. It was a Thursday. I thanked him and asked him if I could start working on Monday so that I could have one last free weekend. He said, sure, come in on Monday. You should also know that we are a union shop, and once you're here, you will have to go down and register at the local, District 65 on Astor Place. Thank you, Mr. Bass. He said, Fred. We shook hands. Wonderful, I'll see you Monday. That's great that you have a union. On Monday, August 21st, I began work. I entered the side door with other employees, saw Fred, and asked where I should go. He said, go back and work with this guy, Ed Forley, back in fiction. Ed was leaving the Strand in a few months, and he was to show me what his job had been. He was going to do lookups right next to me and would provide me guidance. the main floor. Everyone I met was unique, astonishing, intimidating, even frightening. Everyone shouted commands, requests, responses. Every other call was for Devereaux, an enigmatic polymath from Detroit. Neil Winokur was Fred's powerful sergeant-at-arms. Luke Sant handled all the paperbacks by himself. The dour Martin Davis ran the art department with his patrician aide-de-camp, Richard Lilly. One security guard, the noble Stanley Edwards. The warehouse table staff was a daunting clique of divas led by Phil Thornton and his tireless assistant, Paul Secor. Kathy Natanson ran the social science section, all the while wearing a satin half-slip, a lace-trimmed teddy, fishnet hose, open-toed high heels, and a hat with a veil. The review department, the typing pool, shipping, children's, all underground. All handpicked, subservient to, and tolerated by Fred Bass. After 5 years, I knew I had to stay and help the store grow into the 21st century. On my 20th anniversary, I announced the milestone to Fred. He said, "I'm sorry, Ben, we don't give a watch." He loved what he did, thrilled in the possible treasure offered from a closed bag, hidden in closed boxes, a great boss, a working boss, and mentor, an invaluable confidant, stubborn yet financially supportive, provider of time and space for artistic expression, fair. Did I say stubborn? I have spent these many years enjoying what I love doing most with books. Among thousands of like-minded individuals, far more than commercial enterprise, Strand became a safe haven for a kaleidoscopic array of creative spirit. Fred provided me with a wonderful job and a place for me to be me. Thank you, Fred.
Paul Secor was traveling and buying books with Fred for 40 years, and they're still counting. Paul? Try to compete with Ben.
Thank you all for coming. I remember the Strand without walkie-talkies, intercoms, or very many phone extensions. You had to yell to be heard in the back of the floor. I remember when the Strand had no inventory system, when all the tables were maintained by one person, me. Its first computer. I remember when the Strand was a mystery to a young man newly arrived for life on his own in the big city. What I cannot remember is a Strand without Fred. Fred was the Strand. Every decision, every policy depended on him. He was not just its brains, but also its heart and soul. I remember asking Fred, because you asked Fred everything, if I could come in late every Tuesday morning for an entire summer so I could spend the weekends on Fire Island. Although still new, he said yes. I remember Fred wandering the stacks on the 5th floor and saying, "I don't think this is downstairs," and he was usually right. I remember Fred answering any question about the Strand or the book business. Although he always rewarded interest and willingness to learn. He didn't so much offer instruction as draw you into the process. I remember Fred correcting my correspondence because it wasn't polite enough. I remember offering my opinion on a book and having Fred listen. I remember being on my own for reorders because Fred trusted me. I remember going to my first dinner, my first trade show, my first trip to London, all with Fred. I remember the strangeness I felt in the last few years as Fred and I switched roles as lead buyer, and how gracious he was to let that happen, and how generous he was to acknowledge it. I remember Fred's support for all those during the AIDS crisis and all those struggling with addictions. I said to Ben McFall that we were the last two of Fred's Strand children. I was wrong. We are just the last two still working here. We are, in fact, spread throughout this city, this country, this world. And you didn't have to work here to become one of Fred's Strand children. Few people in the remainder business remember a time before Fred. I remember standing next to Fred as he flipped through book jackets while a nervous sales rep stood by bewildered by how rapidly so few were chosen, and then walked out with a major order. I remember that Fred always knew the difference between a bad book and a good rep, because Fred always saw each person individually. I remember watching as those nervous reps became confident people and successful business owners and friends. I remember being one of the nervous. I remember so many things, and they are memories I cannot forget any more than I can forget my arm. They are a part of me and who I am and who I have become. They are Fred's legacy to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Paul. Well said. Bob Hem is a special friend of the family, and because Fred was such a people person, and you could see that with the connection with the employees, Bob is going to talk a little bit about their appetite for adventure.
Well, I'm certainly honored to be here as one of the many friends of Fred Bass and his family. Many I see here today and downstairs earlier. My friendship with Fred and Pat began over 50 years ago in 1967. After a life spent together in New York City, Fred and Pat moved to the suburbs, Pelham Manor. When we first met, we were both in our late 30s. We were both 21 when we married. We both shared a love for books. We both commuted to New York City, I by train and Fred by car. A GM Suburban, a practical business choice since he turned it into a company truck for his staff to move books in the city, and then he drove it back home. Along with our friends, we enjoyed weekends playing social tennis and platform tennis in colder weather at the Pelham Country Club. And there was a variety of year-round entertaining among friends, pool parties, holiday dances, poker games, love poker, and yes, even a toga party. Those were fun times. But there was much more to Fred. He was an avid reader, particularly on science, which fueled his interest in discovery and also into exploration, something we both had in common. I remember seeing a note tacked on his buying desk at Strand that read, "We are more than a bookseller. We are a place of discovery." We discussed finally putting reading into activity. So in 1986, Fred and I, along with our wives, arranged for a first-rate 3-week safari to Africa. Kenya to Tanzania, the Serengeti, to see the great animal migrations, and more. 3 years later, Fred, Mark Durso, and I, with the same guides, returned to Tanzania, where we traveled with camping gear and so forth, few roads over 500 miles, down to southern Ruaha. Camping with the Maasai tribe was one of our unforgettable experiences. In '92, along with our wives, we explored the Galapagos, where we swam with sea lions and much, much more. And then on to Peru, and then Ecuador, to visit the ruins of Machu Picchu. In the early 90s, I retired from business and bought an aerobatic sports plane. Fred was my first passenger. He flew with me on one of my most difficult landings ever, a twilight on approach to a high mountaintop airstrip into the northern Catskill Mountains. With winds at over 60 miles per hour, it took a lot of time and maneuvering and 3 attempts to finally land safely. Our wives were there to pick us up. Fred often told this story. He loved storytelling, saying that half of his face was a smile, the other half a grimace. Comedy and tragedy, right out of a Greek literature. Fred loves to tell stories. In '93, Fred joined me to become a member of the Explorers Club. Over the years, Fred enjoyed our club's camaraderie, the lectures and dinners. He also lent his expertise as an advisor on the club's rare books archives. Over time, Fred's health issues slowly put a crimp in his physical life. Tennis and long walks became more and more difficult, but I never heard him complain. Fred was a fighter. About 12 years ago, Fred and Pat moved from Pelham back to the city into an apartment, away from the stairs and closer to his business and all that New York City had to offer. When Fred's health further declined, he finally had to use a walker. He accepted that. It seldom stopped him from driving or going to events. He faced the reality, often with a sense of humor. But again, Fred was a fighter. When I visited Fred before he passed on, he became more the philosopher and acceptor, and again, without complaints or regrets. If you were Fred's friend, you were a friend for life. He was there for you no matter what. You were part of his family. And that went double for his own growing family. Fred's obituary in the New York Times reads like a Charles Dickens novel or Horatio Alger. It's a great American story. The script would make a hell of a movie. Fred may be gone, but not the memories.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Our next 3 speakers are really New York icons. And we're going to have, as the first of the 3, Gay Talese, one of journalism's greats. Many of you know his defining pieces on Joe DiMaggio and Frank Sinatra, and a longtime friend of the store and Fred's. Gay, please.
Thank you, Senator, for keeping the nation alive. Writers are rarely called upon to deliver remarks in public about the owners of bookshops. When writers are invited to a bookshop, they always appear in order to talk about themselves and to promote their books. And while store owners and their employees are invariably welcoming to writers, they are wise not to become too personally involved, because writers, sooner or later, and likely sooner than later, are about to complain. What do they complain about? It's a long list. If they're not complaining that their books are not on display in the store windows, they are complaining that not enough of their books are stacked near the cash registers. Or worse, the book is temporarily out of stock because it became a surprise bestseller, or worse yet, did not become a bestseller. Selling so few copies that it was not reordered and was destined to be remaindered, or even disheartening beyond, unworthy even to be remaindered, and thus sold at 1/10 of its original price in the purgatorio of book publishing. I know many writers, out of politeness I shall not name them, although they are well known within literary circles abundant with complainers, who sometimes enter bookstores and ask one of the clerks how a certain book is doing, while failing to identify themselves as the author. And just as often, the clerk will reply, "We don't have it in stock, but perhaps I can order it for you," to which the author replies, "No thanks," and sheepishly retreats. I suggest that none of what I have just said so far pertains to the Strand bookstore, which, as a book customer as well as a writer for a half-century in New York, I have always found this store to be an oversupply of almost everything. Indeed, I often think that there are too many books in the bookstore, too many books. It's almost suffocating to pursue the cluttered rows and stacks of volumes, and to be sure, nothing is more humbling for a writer than to be surrounded by millions of other writers' books so evident and available. This is the achievement, of course, of the man we honor tonight, the great Fred Bass. Last week in the Wall Street Journal, the reporter James Haggerty recalled that some years ago, Mr. Bass's daughter and successor, Nancy Bass Wyden, decided to modernize the place a bit and add air conditioning. He hated that, but went along, the Wall Street Journal continued, and it might have gone further and said, Fred Bass appreciated the blissful suffocation of his overstocked stalls. He was always breathing books and was ever open to the elements of expanding knowledge. Thank you.
Our next speaker in the Icon Caucus will be a woman who is known for her unparalleled wit. She is perhaps the only New Yorker without a cell phone or a computer. And certainly her book collection inspires awe all by itself. And as soon as she came up to the third floor, she came out raging about what Democrats ought to be doing right now. Welcome, Fran Lebowitz.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wyden. I just thought, since I have you here, perhaps you would like to join me in agreeing that we would like to trade Chuck Schumer for Mr. Wyden. Or failing that, just trade Chuck Schumer. The last time I saw Fred was in June at a gathering here for the 90th anniversary of the bookstore. And at that event, Fred said to me, you know, next year I'm going to be 90, and we're going to have a party, and it's going to be bigger than this party. And I would like you to make a toast to me at that party. And I said I would. And so, unfortunately, I have to do this now. He looked fine to me. I mean, I mean, although I realize that, you know, I have known Fred since I was about 20, although he didn't know me till I was 27 and had a book out. But I knew him because I used to come in and sell books, review copies, and things like that. And when on the occasion of the 90th anniversary, Fred made a speech. And one of the things he said was, in fact, maybe the thing that really struck me was he said, I've been working in this store since I was 13 years old. And he said, everything was different then. And then he leaned in and said in this childlike way, even the brooms were different. And the reason I was struck by this is because I, as the senator said, don't have these modern devices that you all have. And I also am a very meticulous person and take care of things. So I have things for decades, and some of the things I have for decades, my parents had before me or my grandparents have. So I don't really notice the passage of time in that way until, for instance, what happens to me frequently, which is that a young kid, or as opposed to an old kid as well, a kid will come up to me and say, you know, Fran, I love your vintage glasses. Where did you get them? And I always say, they're not vintage glasses. I just still have them. And that's the way I felt about Fred. Because I heard someone, when I was talking about Fred once, say, oh, I know who you mean, that really old school guy. And I thought, Fred's not an old school guy. We just still have him. And that is something that was true till like really 5 minutes ago. And we still have him in the sense that we still have this store. And of course, the family did not discuss this with me, but I'm assuming you're intending to keep the store here. I'm not saying I myself would be that altruistic, but we are counting on you to do that. We were supposed to speak for only 2 minutes. I think I've not spoken for 2 minutes. I'm going to cede the other 30 seconds of my time to the speaker who is following me and who is Paul Krugman. I noted that, and the reason I'm giving him my extra 30 seconds is I am asking him as a favor to me and to everyone if, with those extra 30 seconds, he will please explain Bitcoin. Thank you.
My introductory work is done. All I would add, as you know, Paul Krugman is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and Fred was a great admirer to the extent that he would call me sometimes in the morning and say, have you read Paul? Let's now welcome Paul Krugman.
Bitcoin is a brilliant, technically elegant solution in search of a problem, and it's total nonsense. So that's that. Okay. So I did not know Fred. I knew I've known Nancy slightly. I've done a couple of events here, but of course, let me actually tell you what I did. I came a bit early for this event. Because I thought, hey, let me browse a little bit. And I came a little bit later than I intended to, so I actually had about 10 minutes of wandering through the stacks, and of course walked away with a book, which took me only minutes to find something that I absolutely had to have. And it was not something I was looking for. In fact, it was a book I didn't even know existed, but there it was, and it called out to me. And so, unlike Fran Lebowitz, I have unfortunately become a very digital person. I try not to check Twitter more than 20 times a day. To be honest, most of my reading is in fact ebooks because I travel and it's hard to, when you have that 800-page biography of William Henry Harrison, and it turns out to be totally boring, you're stuck. So it's better. It's a good thing to have something on the plane with you that has a library. But there's few things I'd rather do than spend some time hanging around in a great bookstore. And the reason for that is that online in this digital era, you can always find what you're looking for. What you can find in a great bookstore is what you weren't looking for, which is the thing that and often the book that changes your life. And a really great bookstore is one that is full of those things. And I think I've been to a lot of I travel a lot. I've been to a lot of bookstores. I've been to plenty of bookstores in the UK, which is this is the greatest bookstore in the world. There is nothing like it. And in a way, I'm fortunate that I only had about 10 minutes to go through the stacks, because otherwise I would have walked away with 25 pounds of books and gotten a bad back on my way back up to my apartment. It's a miracle that this place continues to exist. It has never ceased to be someplace which is unbelievable. I mean, I don't have any notion what 18 miles of books really means, but what it does mean is that you can wander down any random row here, and you will find treasures every step of the way. Used books, actually, I love the fact that older books and new books are mixed in together. The new book tables are brilliant, and the curating is fabulous, but the fact of the matter is that it's the stuff that no one is aware of but calls out to me that makes all the difference. And what a monument, what a resource for this city and for the world. Long may it persist. Thank you, Fred Bass. Thank you, Nancy. Keep that flag flying. Thank you.
All right, a little bit more business, and then we're going to have Nancy close. Couple of items. We have special edition bookmarks, according to Nancy, for folks tonight. Signed Max Ferguson posters, and he came tonight from Israel. So wherever Mr. Ferguson is, let's give him a round of applause. And there will also be a dedicated bench in Washington Square Park for Fred as well. So, two other items. I just want to mention all the family. We talked about the girl from Ipanema, Patricia Bass, who is here. And Fred's grandchildren are perhaps having their 7th or 8th dessert, but Ava Rose, William, and Scarlett. Fred's sisters, Dorothy and Eleanor, are here. Fred's nephew, Mark Kurth, is here. We need everybody to wave. And my older son, Adam, aspiring owner of the Portland Trailblazers, is here as well. So before we go to Nancy's remarks and a special presentation that I think is particularly important that we'll close with, as I said, the mayor has been very helpful to the family, as has been the commissioner I just mentioned, Commissioner Rivera, and I understand Commissioner Finkelpearl is here from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, who also has a proclamation to make. And Commissioner, let's do that.
Greetings. So I have this proclamation, which I will present in a minute, but I want to read parts of it. And these proclamations take the form of whereas, whereas New York has long been the proud home to inspiring literary figures and as the entrepreneurial force behind the iconic Strand bookstore for more than 7 decades, Fred Bass stood out as one of these remarkable individuals. Today we celebrate the life and career of a cherished New Yorker who shared his passion for stories with countless people and has left an incredible imprint on our city. There's some whereases that give biography, which I don't have to do. We've done that. But I think one of the things, I read these proclamations from time to time, but this has a very personal story that the mayor actually does really love this place. And I wanted to say, read this, whereas through his commitment to excellence, Fred developed the Strand into a mecca for writers and avid readers, including my own family. And Charlene, Chiara, Dante, and I can all proudly say that we have enjoyed getting lost in the endless stacks. Today, my family and I are honored to lend our support to Fred's daughter and longtime Strand co-owner, Nancy Bass-Wyden, along with Fred's loved ones. And it's amazing, to see the love that's in this room today, really. Friends, colleagues, fellow book lovers, as they celebrate this literary legend in the best way possible by sharing great stories together. Together, we pay tribute to an outstanding New Yorker who instilled a love of reading in a generation of readers and take comfort in knowing that his tremendous legacy will endure at this Greenwich Village institution for years to come. Now, therefore, I, Bill de Blasio, Mayor of the City of New York, do hereby proclaim today, Friday, January 26th, 2018, in New York City as Fred Bass Day.
Thank you. dreaded this moment for so long that I would be here standing in front of you talking about my dad. But I'm so grateful for all of you being here and the speakers and my husband, and thank you. I imagined that I would be completely distraught. But you know, life goes on, and somehow you get the strength. What a rare and intimate privilege to have worked successfully with my dad for over 30 years. Right now, I miss him perched at the buying desk, tie on, sharpened pencil in hand, sometimes a hot tea aside him. But like a lot of parents and children, we didn't always agree on everything. His buying desk used to be near the front door. Customers would enter and then have to make a sharp left to avoid tripping over the boxes. Sometimes there'd be a line of booksellers blocking the front door, causing a bottleneck. But Fred wanted to be the center of action. He wanted to have the customers know that there were fresh books coming in, maybe unusual treasures, maybe the book that you were seeking. And he wanted to see each and every customer. For years, I would come armed with projections that show how if we rearranged the main floor, and if we could only use his selling desk, we could display 1,000 more books. Begrudgingly, he went along. One night, while he was on vacation, so he would not have to witness it, the desk was moved to the back of the store. Fred still had a view, and we sold more books. He was not overjoyed, but eventually he got used to it. Like his father before him, he loved working here and worked until he couldn't. In my dad's case, up until 6 months before dying. He loved to tell people with a wink in his eye, "I want to stop, but my daughter will not fire me." My dad and mom and I had a magical relationship. We worked as a highly functional team. Never was a day where I didn't talk to each one of them. We invested together, we threw parties together, we schemed together. With Ron, we worried about my kids. We ate and traveled together. We shared everything together. How hard was it for my mom and I to see my dad slowly pass? I would say to myself, it's also an honor, a part of the experience of life, like giving birth. We did everything to make him comfortable. I'm so grateful for the nurses who are here, Birdie and Justina and Roxanne and his doctor, George Lombardi. They were so loving to him. Fred, in turn, wanted to make sure that my mom and I would be taken care of, even suggesting that we could turn to him for help 3 days before passing. What a kind, fun-loving man. During the last weeks, we would shout out songs to Alexa and sing and dance to them. I gave him parts to sing and a bell to ring. And yet, Fred, at the very end, stuck in bed, we would catch him counting. 235, 238, 240. Yes, he was still counting books. Maybe even now in the great bookstore in the sky.
But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town. Sad to say, I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.
This You see this guy's in love with you. Yes, I'm in love. Who looks at you the way I do? When you smile, I can tell we know each other very well. How can I show you? I'm glad I got to know you, 'cause I've heard some talk.
The Strand was founded in 1927. My dad was born a year later. My grandma, Shirley Vogel, is holding my dad in Tompkins Square Park. World War I had ended and the country was entering the Great Depression when he was born. My grandfather Ben opened the store with just $600. He initially stocked the store with his own book collection, using a cigar box as the cash register. The store was part of Book Row, which was an area along 4th Avenue that housed 48 bookstores. It ran between Union Square and Astor Place. Today, the Strand is the sole survivor. In 1932, when Fred was just 6 years old, his mother died. Fred and his sister Dorothy entered the foster care system. My dad bounced between homes while his father at times slept in a cot in the back of the store. In 1941, at just 13 years old, my dad began working alongside his father at the store. He started by sweeping the floors and shelving. He'd scout books from all over the city, hauling them up and down 5th floor walk-ups and using the subway system to transport the books back to the store. He learned the book business by putting in hard hours. Fred graduated from Brooklyn College in 1949, earning his degree in English literature. No surprise there. In 1950, Fred was drafted into the Army during the Korean War. He was posted to West Germany, where he became a sergeant. 3 weeks before Fred left for Berlin, he married my mother, Patricia, at Camp Kilmore Army Base in New Jersey. They'd only been on 3 dates, but Fred thought Pat, who was from Wisconsin, was fun and exotic, and I guess he couldn't resist. 66 years later, they're still married.
start spreading the news.
Fred and Ben learned that their lease was not going to be renewed on their 4th Avenue store. Ben wanted to focus on the mail order sales, while Fred wanted to move the store to 12th Street and Broadway. The rent would go up from $125 a month to $400 a month. It was a risky move. Fred won out, and in 1956, the store moved to its current location. They grew the store to 8 miles of books. Not long after the move, my brother Stephen and I were born. We grew up at the Strand. When I was 16, as my summer job, I worked at the Strand alongside my dad and Ben. Unfortunately, that summer, my grandfather also passed away. My dad and I worked together figuratively and literally, expanding the Strand, growing the inventory to 18 miles of books, and the 4 floors it is today. My mom and dad loved trips, they loved their friends, they loved dinner parties. My dad was a people person who loved his friends. Fred loved books about science, exploring, and he loved to travel. But most of all, he loved being in the bookstore surrounded by people and stories. In 2001, my brother passed away. My mom and dad and I would do everything together. In 2005, my husband, Ron Wyden, joined our team. We got married at Cannon Beach, Oregon. My dad was a wonderful father and grandfather. We're all so very thankful to have so many great memories of him. Fred loved his employees. He was always at the buying desk, excited to be there every day. The store has been in business for over 90 years, surviving the Depression, the competition of Book Row, online sellers, big box stores, Amazon, and e-readers. My dad loved people. He loved his customers, and he loved seeing their book collections and hearing their stories. His spirit radiates from the buying desk. His dream was to have a big bookstore and grow the Strand into a cultural center of New York. His legacy lives on every time anyone gets lost in the stacks.
For most of my life, I worked 6 days a week, literally 10-hour days. It's been an exciting adventure for me because every day I'm on a treasure hunt.